You pressed the button and the flash went off and the whole room turned white. Your mother said, "I think I had my eyes closed. Take another one." That was 1974. You do not remember what was on television that night, but you remember that photograph because it is still in a drawer in your house right now. Scalloped edge, colors too warm. Everyone at the table looking surprised because nobody was ready, and that is exactly why it is the best photo you have of any of them. Your father is in it. The kitchen that does not exist anymore is in it. And the only reason any of it survived is a roll of film in a camera that said Kodak. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you are watching from. You remember the yellow box. You might not remember the name of your third grade teacher or what you had for dinner last Tuesday, but you remember that yellow box, Kodak film, that screaming bright yellow on every counter, in every drugstore, in every town in this country. You grabbed it off the rack without thinking about it, the way you grabbed a pack of gum. The 24 exposure, or the 36 if you felt ambitious. The little canister you cracked open with your thumbnail and loaded into the back of the camera, and you always fumbled with it at least once. You advanced the film until the number 1 showed up in that tiny window on the back, and you snapped it shut and you were ready. Ready to record something that mattered, not a selfie, not a video that disappears in 24 hours, a photograph, a physical, holdable, frameable, losable, findable piece of evidence that someone you loved once stood in a place and smiled, and you were there to see it, and you pressed the button. And the flash cube. You remember the flash cube, that little plastic cube with 4 tiny bulbs that clicked onto the top of your camera and rotated 1/4 turn every time you took a picture. The pop of light that blinded everyone in the room, the smell, that hot, burnt, electric smell that meant someone just took a photo. Your mother standing in the kitchen doorway on Christmas morning saying, "Wait, let me get the camera," and everyone freezing with wrapping paper in their laps, and the tree behind them, and flash, and then the little purple spot in your vision for 30 seconds. You went through those flash cubes like ammunition, because every birthday and every holiday and every first day of school required documentation. Not because anyone told you to, because you understood without anyone saying it that these moments do not come back, and the only way to hold them is to press a button and trust a company in Rochester, New York to do the rest. You brought the roll to the drugstore. That was the ritual. You finished the roll, and sometimes the last 3 shots were garbage because you just wanted to hit 24 so you could drop it off. You shot a picture of the dog. You shot a picture of the television. You shot a picture of your own shoes. Anything to finish the roll. Then you drove to the drugstore, stood at the photo counter, and filled out the little envelope, name, phone number, single prints or doubles, glossy or matte. You sealed it, handed it over, and they said Thursday. You drove home, and that was it. You had just given a piece of your life to a stranger in a white coat, and you trusted them with it completely. When Thursday came, you went back and stood in line. They pulled your envelope from a drawer sorted alphabetically. You paid $4 or $5 and you walked outside. You could not wait. Not one more minute. You sat in your car in the parking lot and went through every single print, holding each one up to the windshield for better light. Some of them made you smile, some were terrible, and 1 or 2 of them hit you somewhere so deep in your chest that you just sat there for a second, staring at a moment you almost forgot already happened. That was Kodak. That was what they gave you. Not photography, proof. Proof that you were alive, proof that the people you loved were real, proof that your kids were once that small and your parents were once that young. And the house you grew up in had that wallpaper and that lamp and that kitchen table, and the dog really was that color. Those photos are still in your house right now. You know where they are: a shoebox, a drawer, a plastic bin in the basement, an album someone started and never finished with half the photos still loose in the back, an envelope in the closet with a rubber band around it that went brittle years ago. They are the only proof your children were small, the only proof your parents were young, the only proof that Thanksgiving at Grandma's house actually looked like that. Without those photos, none of it happened. Memory fades. Memory changes. Memory lies to you. But a photograph does not. A photograph is a fact. And Kodak gave every family in America millions of them. The man who made this possible lost his father when he was 8. George Eastman grew up in Rochester with a mother who took in boarders to survive and a sister who used a wheelchair because of polio. He dropped out of school at 14, earning $3 a week as a messenger boy. He worked his way up to become a bank clerk. At 24, he planned a trip to Santo Domingo, and a colleague told him to bring a camera. He bought one. It was the size of a microwave oven. The tripod weighed more than he did. He never took the trip. He stayed home and spent 3 years in his mother's kitchen at night, experimenting with ways to make photography simpler. He started selling supplies from a room above a music store. He found a partner with money. He built a camera you could hold in one hand. In 1888, he put a word on it that he had made up out of thin air: Kodak. It meant nothing. It did not exist until he wrote it down. The first camera cost $25 and came loaded with film for 100 pictures. When you used them all, you mailed the entire camera back to Rochester. They developed your photos, reloaded the camera, and sent everything back. 5 words that changed the world. You press the button, we do the rest. In 1900, he built a camera for children, the Brownie, $1. He gave away 500,000 free cameras to 12-year-olds because he understood something nobody else could see. Put a camera in the hands of a child, and that child will spend the rest of their life believing every moment is worth recording. Before Eastman, only the rich had photographs. After Eastman, everyone had a shoebox in the closet. He gave away more than $100 million to universities and hospitals and dental clinics and a music school. He donated $20 million to MIT under the fake name Mr. Smith, and went to a banquet where everyone toasted the mysterious Mr. Smith, and he raised his glass and smiled, and nobody knew it was him. He never married. He never had children. At 77, his spine was failing him, and he sat at his desk and wrote 6 words on a yellow piece of paper. To my friends, my work is done. Why wait? By the mid-1990s, the company he left behind was worth $28 billion. Kodak controlled 90% of the film market in America, 85% of all camera sales. More than 140,000 people went to work every morning under the Kodak name. Rochester ran on Kodak the way Detroit ran on Ford. The whole city breathed because that company breathed. The yellow box was on every shelf on the planet. The phrase Kodak moment had entered the English language as a way of describing anything worth remembering. Paul Anka sang their jingle on television, and families sat in their living rooms watching a montage of birthdays and weddings and first steps and cried because they recognized their own lives in those pictures. Kodak was not a company. Kodak was the record of American life. Every holiday, every vacation, every baby, every prom, every wedding, every funeral where someone held a camera with shaking hands, because even grief deserves a witness. That was Kodak. All of it. Everything you wanted to keep and everything you were afraid to lose. They held it for you in a yellow box, and then they killed themselves. In 1975, a 23-year-old engineer named Steve Sasson was working in a Kodak lab in Rochester. His supervisor gave him a throwaway assignment. See if you can find a use for this new chip that converts light into digital data. Nobody asked him to build a camera. Nobody even thought it was possible. Sasson built one anyway. He scrounged a lens from a junk bin. He wired together 16 batteries, 6 circuit boards, an analog converter, and a cassette tape recorder, and he created the first digital camera in the history of the world. It was the size of a toaster. It weighed 8 pounds. It took black and white images at a resolution of 100 by 100 pixels. It stored them on a cassette tape, and it took 23 seconds to save a single photograph. He named his presentation Film Less Photography and walked into a room full of Kodak executives. He took their pictures before he said a word and then played the image back on a television screen. Nobody asked how it worked. They asked why anyone would want to take a picture that way when there was nothing wrong with film. Then, a marketing executive told him what would become the most expensive sentence in the history of American business. "That is cute, but do not tell anyone about it. They could sell it." They told him directly. They could sell this camera, but they would not, because it would eat into film sales. Kodak held 90% of the American film market. Their entire empire was built on chemistry, on silver halide crystals suspended in gelatin, coated on plastic strips. Every roll of film sold meant processing fees, printing fees, reprinting fees, and enlargement fees. Digital meant none of that. Digital meant no film, no processing, no yellow box. So they patented the technology and they buried it. Sasan kept his prototype for 30 years. He carried it with him every time he changed offices at Kodak. He told almost nobody. The patent was granted in 1978, and there was no public disclosure of the invention until 2001. Today, the first digital camera ever built sits in the Smithsonian. The company that built it filed for bankruptcy 11 years later. But it did not happen overnight. In 1979, a Kodak employee named Larry Madison wrote an internal report predicting that a complete shift to digital photography would occur by 2010. He was almost exactly right. Nobody listened. In 1989, Sasson and a colleague built the first digital single-lens reflex camera. Kodak refused to sell that one too for the same reason. Film was too profitable. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was moving. Canon moved, Nikon moved, Sony moved. Fujifilm, Kodak's biggest rival, saw what was coming and reinvented itself. Kodak saw it too. They had invented it. They were holding the future in their hands in 1975, and they chose to protect the past instead. They spent $5 billion buying a pharmaceutical company called Sterling Drug in 1988 because they thought the future of Kodak was in chemicals. It failed. They sold it in pieces 6 years later. They launched digital cameras in the 1990s, but always priced them too high, always held back, always one eye on the film business that was shrinking every quarter. Their digital camera market share went from 24% in 2005 to 15% in 2007 to 7% in 2010. None of it was profitable. The film revenue was falling. The digital revenue was not replacing it. The cash was bleeding out. $1.6 billion in 2001, $957 million by 2011. 140,000 employees became 19,000. On January 19, 2012, the Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that George Eastman started above a music store. The company that taught the world to take pictures. The company that gave every family in America a shoebox full of proof that their lives had happened. That company stood in a federal courtroom and said, "We cannot pay our debts." They owed $6.8 billion. They had $5.1 billion in assets. They sold their patents, the same digital imaging patents they had pioneered, for $525 million to a group that included Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. The technology Kodak invented. The technology Kodak buried. The technology that destroyed Kodak. Bought by the companies that replaced it. Steve Sasson's prototype sits in a glass case in Washington. His patent expired in 2007. The company that told him not to tell anyone about it was bankrupt 5 years later. Rochester never recovered. You cannot remove 140,000 jobs from a city and expect it to stand up. Kodak was not just an employer. Kodak was the university funding and the hospital donations and the symphony orchestra and the dental clinics and the music school. George Eastman built all of it, and when his company died, a piece of his city died with it. There are blocks in Rochester where you can still see the Kodak name on buildings where no one works anymore. A whole city that existed because one man who lost his father at 8 years old decided that everyone in the world deserved to own a photograph. But you do not think about Rochester when you hear the word Kodak. You do not think about stock prices or bankruptcy filings or digital patents sold to Silicon Valley. You think about the yellow box. You think about the flash cube and the smell and the purple spot in your eyes and your mother saying, "Hold still." You think about that drugstore counter where you dropped off the roll and that parking lot where you opened the envelope and that one photograph that stopped you cold. The one that is still in a drawer somewhere in your house right now. The one of your daughter at the table, or your parents on the porch, or your dog in the yard, or your father in his chair, and you did not know when you took it that it would be one of the last pictures you ever took of him. Now it is the only one you have where he is looking directly at you, and you can see in his eyes that he knew you were there and he was glad. There is a shoebox in your closet, and everything that matters is inside it. Every birthday, every Christmas morning, every summer vacation, every first day of school with the new backpack and the nervous smile, every Thanksgiving where everyone is at the table and the turkey is carved and the camera gets passed and someone says, "Get one of all of us," and you all squeeze together and the flash goes off and nobody moves for a second because the light is still in your eyes. Those are Kodak moments, not because a company told you to call them that, because there is no other word for a piece of paper that holds your entire life. If you have that shoebox, go find it tonight. If there is a photo in there that you have not looked at in 20 years, take it out. If there is someone in that photo who is gone now, hold it a little longer. And if you remember standing in a parking lot tearing open an envelope because you could not wait one more second to see the faces of the people you loved, tell me about that. I read every single comment.